you stepped into the scene in the beginning of 2018. So do you want to, podcasts were big, but they aren't nearly as big as they are now. So how did you end up where you're at? What compelled you to do this to yourself?
It is interesting because it seems like there's a new podcast every week popping up, and there are a ton of them out there. But, when I was the CIO at St. Joe's, we had 700 staff in the IT department. We had 150 contractors. We had 18,000 total care providers across St. Joe's. And I really became aware of two things. First is I was in a position to have great conversations that I wish more people were privy to. And I would talk to like former NSA staffer talking about security, or I'd be sitting there around a round table with 5 or 6 other CIOs, and we were talking about their strategy and what was working and what wasn't working. I'd get a chance to sit across from CFOs and other industry leaders discussing their hopes and dreams for healthcare and where it could go. And I just sat there and I thought, man, I wish my entire staff could hear this. I wish my entire health system could hear this conversation. And too often they don't get a chance to do that because not everybody goes to a conference. Not everybody gets to sit at that table. And I recognized that the value of those conversations. I wanted to bring it to more people. That was the first thing. But the second thing was that every day it seemed like my staff could use a boost in terms of staying current. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I did consulting for the better part of 20 years of my career, and I consulted for great companies in finance and manufacturing, defense, aerospace, consumer goods. And I got to see how they were applying technology to efficiency problems, to consumer experience, to marketing, to supply chain, to just about any area you could think about. And it felt like every time I got on a plane, I was getting smarter because I was getting introduced to all these new concepts of how different industries were doing things. And as I looked around my staff, I realized, and for me as the CIO, I was so focused on what was going on in healthcare, so focused on the problems that were in front of me, that it was hard to stay current, and I wasn't spending the time to stay current. And so that's the second thing I really wanted to address. And so we started a podcast early on to address those two things. And, as you know, the mission, amplify great thinking to develop the next generation of health leaders and propel healthcare forward. And what I do now is I read everything I can find. If I think someone says something really interesting, I invite them to be on the show. And I assume that you aren't reading the stuff I read. So if I have them on the show, you're not hearing it a second time. And I ask them different questions. I ask them questions not from a reporter perspective, but from a former CIO perspective, or from a former, I'm a former chief technology officer as well. So I have a technology background, a business background, and we just try to keep bringing those kinds of things to light. I guess the second part of your question really is, why keep doing it when there's so many podcasts? And I think the reason is because there's so few focused on health IT.